What's up, everybody? It's Alex from Heavy New York, and on the phone, we got Mark and Bobby from BPMD. Thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Hey, Alex. Good to hear you, man.
Yeah, it's good to have you all here. I really enjoyed American Made, which is coming out June 12th. Do you guys just want to talk about what the thought process was in making this material and was there a preconceived idea on how you wanted to cover the other artists' material and whatnot?
Well, it's funny. If you would have asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have given you a different answer. But given the state that we're in right now of everything, this record obviously was fun for us to do. It was nothing more than a fun passion project, if you will. And with the release being next week, being in the middle of coronavirus, COVID, protests, riots, and all the other craziness going on, it's definitely hitting at an interesting time. And still to the point, it's a fun project for us. Especially with some of the tracks on this record, and being all American bands from the '70s, it's nothing more than a fun record.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Being that you guys have both collaborated in Metal Allegiance before, do you think that is there maybe a similar sort of creative process or maybe a similar performance aspect to this as with Metal Allegiance, or was this kind of a completely separate game altogether?
I'll get this. You got it. Well, I was just going to say everything about it was different than a Metal Allegiance standpoint, as far as recording, arranging, even down to everything was different than to a Metal Allegiance record. But then I'll let Bobby finish. But I agree with Mark. But the similarity is that the chemistry was already kind of set. The fact that I had the opportunity to collaborate with Mark and Mike prior, share stages with them. Not once, but to this point, a dozen times. Same with Phil Demo. So the mindset is totally different. The approach is fun, like Mark said, but the chemistry is established, and that's where the success comes from. Okay, everybody, let's have fun and let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, record. Let's make it happen. Let's have fun. Boom. Musicianship shines through.
That's really good to hear. It had to have been convenient, being that you already collaborated together. It's we got all four of us in a band already. Let's do a covers album. It had to have been extremely convenient.
Yeah, well, like Bobby said, the chemistry. Mike and I are two of the four writers and arrangers and ringleaders of MA, and so we have a great chemistry. It's my fourth record with Mike. On top of God knows how many shows and tours and whatnot. So we had that drummer bassist. I know how he works. He knows how I work in the studio. With Bobby and I actually co-wrote that MA song on the last record, Mother of Sin, and we got along real well with that. So we developed a really cool chemistry with that, with writing, which is obviously different than doing covers. But we had that chemistry of on record working together. And with Phil and I worked together on some solos for the first MA record. He's done a shit ton of MA shows from the very beginning. Phil's been involved with that. So, at least for myself, the chemistry was there between the three other guys, sharing stage right live with Demo, Portnoy's drum, just about every MA show, a few shows he didn't drum on, but just about everyone. And then Bobby, he's been on just about, in the later part here, a lot of the MA, the bigger shows and activity that we've done. So the chemistry was vital for this. And, Mike shares the same sentiments, obviously, because he's, the roles are reversed for him being a drummer. So it's just, the chemistry was everything with this.
When it comes to executing other artists' material, was the idea to maybe combine elements of what we heard in Overkill and Machine Head and Vio-lence and Winery Dogs and Sons of Apollo and Metal Legion? Were you guys trying to maybe take the sounds of your other projects and just cover it in your language, or did you kind of want to stay as close to the original songs as possible?
Well, I think you have to reimagine it, but you also have to keep the integrity of the original. So there's kind of a fine line between the two. I can't sing like Steven Tyler, and I learned that decades ago, trying to copy him, trying to cut my teeth on some of his stuff when I was doing covers, and I just couldn't pull it off.
but there's nothing wrong with being me and presenting that. So I think that going in with that lesson, I mean, instantly helps what the final outcome is going to be, because you're not banging your head against the wall trying to be David Lee Roth, for instance, in my case, which I can't do. There's one David Lee Roth, there's one Steven Tyler. It's just the way it works. But to go in, keep the integrity of the song, keep the phrasing of the song, but present it as I would present it. And I think, for instance, Phil took that approach too, because his tones were updated. I think the two keys here that were the fact that we had done Mike's drums in a one-day period, much like these songs were recorded originally back in the 70s. Then we don't have to reimagine them. We just have Mike's style on those drums recorded like it would be in the 70s. Add Mark's walking bass to that, we start getting that integrity I'm talking about. So then it was easy, I think, for Phil and I to present ourselves just as we do under normal circumstances and still keep those songs recognizable.
Yeah.
And if I could just add one thing to that, you know, as far as a performance standpoint of playing, it's, at least for me on bass, it's a completely different style of playing. You know, with MA, you know, when you're doing an MA record and you're writing, you know, the songs, and then when it comes down to recording them, completely different style of music. Opposed to this, where Bobby said, you know, walking bass lines, I went into a completely different mindset on my style, approach, and even technique, for that matter, on these songs.
Mm-hmm. Could for people, because so far is the only single at the moment, correct me if I'm wrong, that you released so far is the Toys in the Attic cover. Could that almost like serve as maybe like a clear representation of the direction of this whole album, or is there going to be a little bit more surprises incorporated on here as well?
Well, we also released Evil, which is a song released by Cactus on the Restrictions record back in the early 70s, I think 73 maybe. Mark's actually a big student of the era, so he probably has the month and day, too. But so that was the second single, and we're working on American Band right now that'll be coming out very soon after our talk right here. They're all a little bit different. I think the one thing that's a commonality to them is that there's an energy that the chemistry that I brought up earlier exudes through all the songs. There's nothing taken into halftime. It's taken from an energetic live perspective. You know, and I've always been the kind of guy that when it's live, it gets more than when, you know, you're in the studio thinking about it. But that's the way that this record was started with those drum tracks. So everything we built on top of that has that energy. So sure, there's different nuances throughout it, but I think, let's say the same energy approach through that is the thread from track to track.
Mm-hmm. Do you think when you're covering another artist's material, is it maybe, for lack of better terms, is it maybe like less creative than if you're working on your own material, or is there still maybe like a creative aspect into covering artist's material in a way?
You know, for me, and this might sound crazy, the beauty of this was we each got to pick two songs, and then there were two community picks. And if somebody picked two songs, you couldn't argue them. So if you didn't like them or you didn't know them, this, that, and the other, you still had to do it. So there was a challenge there in not only learning someone else's material, but adapting your style to it. So what I found on a bass perspective is I very rarely mimicked what the other the original bassist was doing. Some songs I did, you know, like Toys in the Attic. I kept it kind of close to what Tom Hamilton was doing. But then you have a song like Beer Drinkers and Hellraisers. It was a complete, I am doing nothing that Dusty Hill was doing, which is, we kind of turned it into, you know, it's our representation of Beer Drinkers. So my point was, okay, what can I do to open things up? How can we turn into a jam band? How do we heavy it up? How do we sound just jamming? How do we, if we're just going off the rails, what's it going to sound like? So I would say about half the songs I'm doing complete creative, nothing that the original bass player is doing. However, on the flip side of things, the structuring, the arranging, 90% of the lyrical content is still the same. But with the individual instrumentation, you know, we took creative liberties there. And being that the four of us have many other projects that are obviously all original projects, you know, that's what we do. You know, we create, we write, we come up with our styles, given the, you know, whatever band, project, the song that it is.
Mm-hmm. And you know what's funny is just because you're covering Aerosmith, you're covering ZZ Top, you're covering Leonard Skinner, you're covering Mountain, like you're covering artists of many different styles. And I remember, Mark, you mentioned that you said that you had to like adjust your bass playing style completely different from Metal Allegiance. But is it fair to say that almost every single song for the recording of this almost called for a new approach?
Absolutely, 100%.
Mm-hmm. And like, was there any improvising involved, or was there kind of like an art that you both had to learn in a way in executing it?
I don't know about Bobby, but for me, I didn't go in with sheet music charts or anything written down. I went in with basic song knowledge and chords, and I just went. Everything you hear from me recorded is either done in 1 or 2 takes. I didn't punch. I didn't copy and paste. I didn't Command Z, undo, punch this, ed. I didn't do any of that with this. It was, again, going in as the mindset of a musician of the 70s and how they would record. But they didn't have those capabilities back then. And if they did with tape, when you're getting that razor blade out and you're cutting tape and you're doing this and that was very expensive back then. So they rarely did it because of the cost behind it. So I went in with that mentality of, got to do this in 1 take. Or if you don't get it in 1 take, scrap it, start it over. So yeah, I it was not only creative freedom within the song, but had to change. Every song was a different task in hand. At least for me.
Mm-hmm. I kind of agree with that. I went in with the majority of my tunes, all except for 2. I went out with no lyric sheets. I knew a lot of them from when I was a young man, when I was growing up. I just needed to go over them a few times to kind of get that vibe, and then figure out my own presentation. But there was a couple of tunes where I had to dig in a little bit harder. DOA by Van Halen, Vampire by Blue Oyster Cult. I was familiar with the songs. I knew they existed. I knew what they were all about, but I never considered myself someone who performed something like that. So as they were somebody else's picks, I was like, I got to get into this and learn it. But by the time I was recording it, it was just pretty natural, just my own way of doing it.
Yeah, it sounded like this was a very, very organic recording process, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Very.
Yeah. And kind of like a similar question as I asked before, but like, do you think that maybe experimenting and, having to kind of go outside your comfort zones with executing this material could maybe allow you guys to bring some newer stuff into Overkill or into Metal Allegiance in a way?
Okay, that was part of the challenge, but again, you have to remember, this wasn't, for me, this wasn't like some... Mark was born in 1980. I was born in 1959. I knew the 70s. I've kept part of that phrasing in the way I write to the current day with Overkill. Not always. I write as a thrash vocalist, but I try to separate myself from some of the, let's say, generic thrash with melody. And the melody and the phrasing that I'll go to is that when we're working a heavy blues breakdown, I'll go to the phrasing of the 70s. So it's something that I already knew. It wasn't like it's this huge challenge for me. It was something that was common to that era, especially in this type of rock and roll that BPMD presents.
Mm-hmm. And like, do you think that maybe you'll make this like a regular thing? Maybe like you'll tackle doing 80s covers next, or 90s covers, or 2000s covers? Like, do you think this could be like a new series you guys might work on?
BPMD, ABBA.
If I heard you cover Dancing Queen, that would be the most amazing thing I think I'll ever hear in my life. Please.
Somebody's done that. I know somebody's done. Yeah. Who did Dancing Queen? Was it one of the? Wasn't it like who did Dancing Queen? Was it like a death metal band?
One of them did it.
Black metal band, yeah.
Somebody did it.
Yeah.
But no, we plan on doing more records. We definitely have ideas for other concepts to cover around the world. I don't see myself right now in this present time covering anything later than 1979. There's so much great music from the 70s that we're still discovering and that we want to pay tribute to. So I would say it's going to be other territories of the world, 70s for sure.
Yeah, and I'd imagine, because, everybody knows ZZ Top, everybody knows Aerosmith, everybody knows Leonard Skinner, but I'd imagine, like, maybe we could, like, dig into, like, maybe the dark depths of the 70s, maybe, like, pull out some underground stuff that we never heard before, maybe bring it to the spotlight as well, right?
Well,
That's a cool idea, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, man. We've done a lot of press so far, especially Bobby and I on this record. And I am shocked by how many people in Europe never even heard of Mountain or the James Gang. And it's a lot. And it's probably every other interview didn't know the song. And their first exposure to that music was our recordings of that, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And hopefully they open up and they listen to Mountain and they listen to the James Gang and Cactus as well is another one. They didn't know who Cactus was.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that this opens up people's musical minds to these great bands.
Definitely. But
you also have Europe. You also have the UK, which the UK in the '70s was just off the hook with what was going on as far as rock and roll. And I'm not even talking the Deep Purples, the Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin. I'm talking talking Status Quo. I'm talking Fleetwood Mac. The underground stuff, the stuff that wasn't at street level or above. There's a lot of choices out there where we could just go mess around in different parts of the world if we wanted to, different locales.
Yeah, I've discovered music, like songs that bands have covered. I didn't know that they were covers, and it got me into the original bands that they were covering, and I never heard of them. So I really think that you guys are going to expose many different generations to classic 70s songs and maybe some even underground stuff that has yet to be discovered.
It's a great point, man. Rock and roll's a chain. I've brought this up in other interviews. It's not about where Overkill is or what Metal Allegiance does. It's about what preceded us and about what's going to follow us and being a link in that chain. And if you look at the Cactus song Evil, they reimagined a Willie Dixon song from the 1950s. And we reimagined the Cactus release from the 1970s. So it kind of shows the length of that chain with regard to what rock and roll is all about and how it gets legs. This is a guy in Overkill and a guy in Metal Allegiance and Mike Portnoy and Sons of Apollo and Sybil and Vio-lence reimagining something Willie Dixon wrote in 1954. This is 70 years gone by at this point. That just shows what the strength of that chain is, or let's say the rings on the tree.
Well, are you going to be taking any song requests maybe in the future?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, because if you could do a cover of maybe like "Message in a Bottle" or "Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic" by the Police or something like that, that would be amazing. I think both of you guys have the technical capabilities to cover Sting and Stuart Copeland and everybody else.
Well, the Police is on my list, that's for sure. I'm a huge Police fan, and they're certainly on my list.
Yeah, Sting is one of my favorite musicians ever. Just a song request. Consider it. And before we go, first off, I want to thank you guys so much for your time today. Obviously, thanks to a certain virus that I choose not to name. But do you think that maybe after, when shows start happening again, maybe you guys will be interested in taking this on the road, maybe playing a couple stages for some jam nights?
We're working it out. We're trying to work that out now. We're trying to get everybody. We obviously have our own schedules, and we're all looking to get back to work like the rest of the world is. But that doesn't mean that this doesn't have value in some theater somewhere. Specialty shows, festivals. I see cruise ships. I see, that kind of stuff with this. 2-month tours, I would doubt it. But for sure, 2-week tours.
Yeah, and we definitely look forward to it. Every time I see all of you guys perform with Metal Allegiance, it always feels like, a family reunion. I look forward to it every year at NAMM. And to, have this new little thing happening, I really think it's going to get a lot of people enjoying this whole reunion and unity aspect of what you guys do. So hopefully we can make it happen. Bring it to New York City at least, please.
Alex, I was sitting here trying to figure out where we did the interview, and it finally came to me. We were in the stairway.
Yes, exactly. Yep. And you said my favorite line of any. I did 17 interviews that day. You said my favorite line in every interview when I asked how you feel about other people taking inspiration from you, and you said, "Get out of the way, kid. I ain't done yet."
That's funny.
That was the line of NAMM 2020 for me.
That's great.
Yeah. But,
I'm hoping there's a winter NAMM this January, man, and I don't know if it's 50-50 right now, but if there's a NAMM, we'll be out there jamming again. So
yeah, but thank you guys so much. Everybody, we are here with Bobby and Mark of BPMD. Be sure to pick up American Made when it comes out on June 12th. This is Alex from Heavy New York. We will see you next time. Be safe, everybody.